I was at a Catholic conference recently. It was hosted by Sent Ventures. The conference was for Catholic ministry leaders and Catholic-owned secular businesses. As I walked around the conference, I marveled at how far Catholic ministries have come in overall professionalism since I first began in ministry 30 years ago. The ministry leaders were fully Catholic, but also skilled at the best business practices needed to succeed in any venture. I'm joined today by Craig Miller. He's the president of Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, and he's done this for more than 10 years. Our topic is building a nonprofit with a for-profit mentality. We'll address this today on the Catholic Entrepreneur Podcast. Welcome to the Catholic Entrepreneur Podcast. Our sponsor is Ave Maria University. Your child or grandchild will thrive at Ave Maria. Located in southern Florida, Ave Maria students receive a world-class education and extraordinary formation in faith, virtue, and life. 3 of my kids have attended Ave Maria, and we could not be more pleased with the experience. Learn more at avemaria.edu. My guest today is Craig Miller from Focus. After a successful sales and marketing career in Silicon Valley, where he worked with Fortune 100 companies, Craig concluded that he wanted to bring his gifts to the Catholic faith he loved. He would join Curtis Martin and Focus. Craig served Focus in senior leadership for 20 years, including 10 as its president. He continues that work today as the CEO of Focus's new Mission Foundation, a new charitable organization dedicated to supporting the new evangelization and the mission of Focus. Craig, great to have you with us.
Hey, great to be here with you, Matt.
So, Craig, you and I had a good conversation a couple months ago where we were talking about some things, and then you shared this idea of the topic of running a nonprofit with a for-profit mentality. And to me, it made such sense because I know your background from corporate America. And frankly, I think you've heard me pay big compliments to Focus because you guys really do run Focus very, very well. So why is this topic a topic that you came up with that you thought was important to discuss?
Yeah, I think obviously the topic itself has kind of a tantalizing headline. And maybe I should qualify it by saying what I wouldn't say is you should run your not-for-profit like a for-profit. I think there are problems with that. A couple of obvious ones: profit is king. People are assets. We don't want to do that. But I think you said it well when you said in terms of the mentality. And I think I would go down that road and say, what are some things we could borrow in terms of a mentality? And I know it's not a total crossover. Sometimes we say, I don't know if we can measure it, but we say, hey, maybe it's 80% is a direct overlay. If we could copy some of the things that for-profits do really well in the pursuit of their goals, 80% of it would work. 10% probably needs a major adaptation, and maybe 10% doesn't work at all. But I don't think it would be right to dismiss all of it because we know that for-profit sometimes has issues and problems in the way they go about earning profit.
So Craig, I just came from a conference, and it was a Catholic conference. It was the Sent conference, and it was really buttoned up. It really gave my heart, joy to see Catholicism really coming along. Have you seen the Catholic world mature in these regards?
Yeah, I do think so. I would say it's obviously there. Is it all the way there? Probably not. I think there are some old paradigms we wrestle with. For instance, an employer walks into an engagement with their crew or their staff for any kind of not-for-profit work, and one of the first things that comes into paradigm is, I will undercompensate this staff, and they'll be okay with it because they're on mission with me. And there's a lot of justification behind that. That's not all bad. The problem is the employee's response that you can sort of bake in with that mindset is, aren't you grateful that I'm here? That's a terrible place to start in terms of the relationship between the employer and the employee. And then there's confusion. For a lay apostolate like Focus, what does it mean to adapt ora and labora? But how do you do that when you only have 8 hours a day together? We've taken different approaches towards that. We keep tweaking it, trying to improve it, but those are real challenges. We're trying to bring these two worlds together.
Craig, I've had a sense as one who's observed Focus for 20 plus years, and then saw you and saw Curtis and saw some of the other team that you put around, that you guys were always tweaking and adjusting. I almost felt like there was a holy tenacity with you guys in that regard. Would that be a pretty close description?
I think so, and I hope so. I mean, it really is. If you have this belief that God deserves the best, you know you're never there. And so what you did 5 years ago obviously could be a lot better today. Even what you did 6 months ago could be better today. What we try not to do is, yank the whole organization around. No, we're doing it this way. No, we're going to do it this way. But you try to make those modifications as you're moving, as you're running towards a goal. You try to make those modifications to create something with a greater impact, something with greater efficiency.
Yeah, and it's a fine line. I mean, I get why people would be nervous a little bit about this topic, because it's a fine line at looking at the ends as an ends. At Ascension, we would spend considerable amounts of dollars on our graphic designs. And some might look at that on its face value and say, my goodness, that's way too much money for a cover. And it was risky to do it. But in the end, we think it actually ended up being better for the receiver and therefore better for the church. What do you think are some of the other underlying mindsets that might be skewing us in the direction of lesser quality, lesser professionalism, lesser execution than the secular world?
A lot of it comes down to confusion. What does this look like? Particularly now, I think in our day, I mean, how many lay people actually work for the Catholic Church, different apostolates, and for the church directly, and dioceses, parishes? It's much broader than it used to be. So these are individuals who go home and have families, and they have boundaries on their work. They walk in, they're doing some, oftentimes they're doing work that was completed by the religious and priests, and now they're being done by lay people. And so the rules have changed on us pretty quickly. I should say the circumstances have changed the rules pretty quickly. And that's led to the confusion. And so if I pointed to a few things, I think I'd go back to where I was at before, where if an employee walks into a situation where hardly anybody wants this job, that's not great leverage for performance for the organization. That's a bad place to start.
In the evangelical world, maybe in the Mormon world, they didn't have this separation of clergy and laity, and therefore it created a survival of the fittest mentality, which then spawned more dynamic ministry, more dynamic publishing, more dynamic everything, because of a kind of capitalistic approach to it. Whereas in the Catholic world, we were big and slow-moving, and as you alluded to, Father Smith and Sister Jones did everything, and we really didn't have to perform. So there was a difference from the word go in the Protestant experience and the Catholic experience that kind of spawned this more proficient execution of ministry.
Yeah, Matt, I think that's great insight. This is very new to us. I mean, really, we're focused now, by the grace of God, employs 1,200 plus laypersons. I don't know, my lifetime, that didn't happen. And they're out there doing great work for the church, but they're doing it as laypersons. So these new dynamics, new problems. And I think we've got to work through some of those old paradigms and problems. I'll give you one more that comes to mind, is when I talk about the quality of focus as leadership, whether in finance or IT, some of these professional roles, as I'm talking to board members and benefactors, I feel like I almost have to talk my way out of a position of they must be something inferior to what you could get on the for-profit market.
Wow.
Because they decided to do this.
Yeah.
And that's just an old paradigm that just kind of, it's cyclical, because the more people believe that, the more they condition around that, the more it becomes real, the more they believe it. And I just think we need to smash through that. And like you said, maybe these older brothers and sisters, they probably have a lot to teach us there, and we should learn more from them.
Sure. A month or two ago in setting this up, I asked you a question. I said, Craig, what do you think are essential elements of effective ministry? It took you 3 seconds to rattle these 4 things off. You said the right mission, the right people, discipline to the process, and a great culture. And you said there's more, but you had those 4 so at the ready that it then made me think, oh no, this is a mantra that is part of Craig's corporate experience DNA and has trickled over into focus. When you say the right mission, what are you saying?
Yeah, I think this is a problem in the church. Focus's mission statement is is so broad we could get lost in it. Our mission statement is to know Christ Jesus and fulfill his great commission. Well, that means you could do anything, right? Almost anything within the church serves that. And so you have to make an application of the mission statement. What does it mean for us right now? And I actually think people should revisit their mission statement, maybe not once every year, but certainly within a 10-year span, they should look at it and say, does this still fit where we think God is calling us to be? And then I think the other important part of that mission statement is, this is what I was alluding to first, is how do you get from mission to objectives in a 1 or 3 or 5 year plan? What are we really trying to achieve in alignment with that mission? And that makes it real. It takes it from something very lofty and aspirational to, okay, no, this is the plan. And then I didn't mention that before, but obviously a great plan following the mission is going to lead to everything else.
I think you would also say, Matt, in that statement, the right mission, we need to know what our why is, and we need to stay on point with that why, even if you revisit it, periodically. A calling, a focus, and staying on point with that.
I think it's well articulated. I think the why is fully baked into a mission statement, and potentially sometimes you could come up with boundaries or specificity as to where you're targeting all of the resources that God has given to you to pursue your purpose, and that should come into a mission statement. The problem we have is when you try to find that right balance, like how much can go into a mission statement that defines all of that without being a mission statement that nobody can remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so it's we've always had that challenge, and I think we still live it today. We simplified it greatly, and then we have the page 2. Okay, here's what we're doing. We actually call it, I don't know if you've heard this before, it's new to me in the last few years, introduced by an article from Harvard Business Review. We call it a zoom in and a zoom out on that mission statement. What are we doing right now, next 12, 18 months? That's a zoom in. A zoom out is how is that taking us on the trajectory of achieving mission?
Very good. Craig, the second point you made after the right mission is the right people. You didn't hesitate when you said it. What are you saying by saying the right people?
Yeah, I'm not even sure the 4 that I mentioned are in any sort of particular order or priority as to what's most significant. You can easily put people at the top. People are so important to what you're doing. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a long answer for this, Matt, and we can go back to any piece of it that you like. But we started our current ideal for engaging people comes from a book called Top Grading. And I'm going to say that with a little bit of a caveat because Top Grading is a very secular book. And it's not terrible. It's not harsh. But I think you have to look through your Christian lens as you read it. Well, what would that mean in our organization? But I think it's a constant corrective. And I'll give you just a few things that make it so important to us at Focus. One, it says, don't assume when you have a job opening within the work that you're doing, that you can post a rec, post that employment offer out there and the best person for that job will pop up in the next 30, 60, or even 90 days. Probably not going to happen. Because that person has to be looking for a job, out of work, and there's always a limited pool when you do it that way. So one of the tenets of our engaging the right people in this mission is we're always looking for talent. It's a constant conversation. Might be analogous to sort of trolling off the back of the boat. It's just the line's always in the water, no matter if you're moving or not. It's just happening. You got to make time for conversations. I have spoken to people, leaders within Focus, for 5+ years before they became employees. But we spoke about the opportunity of working together when the time was right. And I think that's been tremendously helpful. When they get here, the second piece I'd add is role clarity. Like, do I know what I'm doing? You got a lot of people here. What does it look like for me where I stand, and what does my success look like? And when I talk about that success, are there particular success factors that I can use to judge or measure my performance? Is that clearly stated to me? So we talk about that. And you got to do it in a way, and I had a really hard time with this early in my career, where feedback was given once a year. You have your review cycle, and employees are surprised. I don't think anybody should ever be surprised in how we're doing. So we really work hard in training our leaders that as you're working with people, constantly give them feedback. It's a value to them, no doubt about it. Nobody loves to hear, sort of a critique or criticism all the time, but there's lots and lots of good things to say.
Sure.
And then if there isn't such a good thing to say, you don't want to save it for 12 months and surprise them.
Right.
So you want to get it out there. I think those candid conversations are important. I think they're also important in optimizing an individual's contribution to the job in this sense. We're very specific about the direction of those conversations. If it's not working for the individual, they're the first to be dissatisfied with it. They're the first to feel that they're not thriving.
Mm-hmm.
The individual knows that. And that's somewhat unjust and unfair to have somebody in a position where they just feel like they're not thriving. But if you can have this candid, open conversation, first step is, are there things I can do to change the way I right now am performing my job? That would be the first question we work on together. The second question, if the first doesn't fix it, is, can we change the job, either the one you're in some way, or is there another job in the organization that potentially would be a much better fit for your skill set and your heart and what you love to do? Maybe that's it. And then the last place you want to go, and thankfully through this process, we don't have to go this way very often, is maybe this is just the wrong organization. What you want to bring right now, or what you can bring right now, is different than what the organization needs. So how do we create a win-win to get you into a place that's outside of, in our case, focus, but allows you to get to all those things that you desire?
Very good. So our topic is running your nonprofit with a for-profit mentality. So far, we've discussed two things: the right mission, the right people. This next question is not asked because we're taking a swipe at any organization. You and I love the church, so it's only said from a posture of love. And another caveat is that you also shared with me, Matt, listen, we do a lot of things right, but we're still learning. So no one is saying that I know you're not saying that Focus is doing everything perfect. So let's juxtapose maybe what we've seen in the church in the past 50 or 100 years, and ergo, what do we need to improve on?
Yeah, I would only reiterate what you just said. We both love the church, and we love the people who do the work within the church. We fail them when we don't create a system that serves them in some way. And I think those systems speak of the discipline necessary, whether it's communication or just in the transparency of the work being done, what you're expecting and what's being delivered. That part I think is missing so often. And and for me, it's very sad to see great people, very, very good people, relationally in a very good place personally, relationally not such in a good place when it comes to the work they're doing together. And you begin to live somewhat of a nightmare. Nobody's very happy with it. We believe the number one factor in job satisfaction is your relationship with your boss. If that's not going well, sometimes in the church, you see that extended for just years, way too long. And so I think you've got to find this system that serves them. You evaluate the system, you tweak it, if necessary, you abandon it, find another one. You got some sort of consistency in a system that allows that individual to really excel as much as they can.
Really good points there. That takes me nicely into the third point that you made: discipline to the process. And what you said, I took down your words. You said working against system failure. So if you want to move from a historic nonprofit mentality into more of a for-profit mentality, you should work against system failure. What are you saying there?
I think first you clearly identify the system you're working with and train to it, tweak it, make sure everybody's on board with that system, but then be open-minded enough and humble enough to go, you know what, this system's just not a good fit here. Let's do something else. That works. But I do think, to your point, having a system that people understand and then being disciplined to it is really key in any organization's execution.
And it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyhow. So you and I are talking about, again, right people, right mission, right systems, and we're doing so perhaps in a clear way. A message might be said that somehow this means that the organization is losing its heart. You would probably say, no, Matt, it's just the opposite. We care so much about the people in the organization that we're putting these things in place precisely because we care about the mission and the people. Would that be accurate?
That'd be 100% accurate. There's a book that got popular within Focus for the last few years, and I finally got to the book myself. The book is called Traction. You've probably heard of it.
Yes.
I'm really a late student to business ideas these days. But I finally got to the book Traction, and because so many of our departments were implementing it, and they loved it. They loved it for exactly the reason you said. It was like they were getting results, but I think more importantly, they felt good about the work they were doing. And it takes you all the way from mission to execution through that process. Here's how you work with people. It breaks it down. There's probably 6 or 8 business books in this one book. The author did a very good job to sort of, percolating up the best ideas from the different business books and putting them together and how to run a single system. And he actually calls it EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. That's his system. That system has been adopted by a lot of organizations. In fact, I think he started thinking this is probably good for a 100-employee organization, and they've done some revisions since saying, why would we stop there? Why couldn't we create a system that works for even large organizations? Here's how you would build upon it in sort of a modular means. As you get larger, make sure you're putting this part in and whatever. And I think more to the point that you were making, choose that system, be disciplined to it, hold yourself accountable to it, and you will find a whole lot more success in the way you're trying to execute towards a mission.
Yeah, good stuff. I'm looking forward to having an EOS person on. I think there are actually maybe some Catholic origins to that as well, not overtly, but in the hearts of some of those who created that program. I wouldn't be surprised. So the fourth thing that you had mentioned was culture, and I want to quote your line that I took down. You spoke of, quote, being necessary for your individual staff members to pursue the life they want. I liked the line at the time. Unpack what you're saying there.
Sure. And I think I mean it in this sense. Last thing we want to do is create an environment for them to come and contribute with their labor that is in total conflict to other purposes that exist in their life. So the service to the mission should be aligned. And it's upon us as management, we can't over customize it to every individual. But I think with broad strokes, we could bring what we're doing in terms of building culture to the individuals so that they can make their own adaptations within it. And it is something they feel, okay, this is a whole game in my heart. This is something I want to do. And it works with everything else. I mean, we don't desire the ever elusive work-life balance. That's just not where we are with culture. It is ever elusive. People pursue it, they don't really get there. What we could do is create an integration and a prioritization of work in your life, meaningful work towards mission and purpose as you understand it in your heart. Then I think we're in a much better place. You get away from, hey, I have this job because it is a job. We don't want people here with jobs, but I have this job because it affords me the things I really desire in life. It allows me to do the things I really desire in life. We would love to put that together culturally in a way that says, no, this is part of your life in a very meaningful way. One more example is we encourage personal apostolate for all of our staff. So if you serve the homeless in the city of Denver from where we're at here, let's carve out some time and let's make that a part of who you are, what you're doing, and how you're serving.
Craig, let's talk about business model. Often in the Catholic world, money, is a little bit of a dirty word. In fact, Tom Corcoran, who I had on in an early show, really has a lot of good thoughts on this. And Tom's a real balanced, solid Catholic guy. And you and I are familiar with the phrase, of course, no money, no mission. But just talk for a few minutes why it's not a dirty word, why it's not a bad concept for any apostolate, whether it's a for-profit or a non-profit doing Catholic work, to really pay attention to the business model. And that has to be a top priority because, if you're out of business, you're not doing anyone any good. And what counsel would you give other nonprofits who might secretly think that that's a dirty concept, that's a bad concept to be thinking about?
Yeah, I think the easy part of that is it was already in your question, Matt, in a very good way, is that it's not a dirty thing, right? You don't have a mission unless you can put a lot of different collaborative efforts and gifts together. And a big part of that mission is what comes from your benefactors. So you have what your staff is doing, you have what leadership is doing, but you don't have a whole lot going on if your benefactors aren't part of it. So we do our best to bring our benefactors on mission with us. And obviously the fruit of that is the funding they bring towards the mission. So just to really pile on your point, that's not only not dirty, it's a necessity of an effective mission. Here's the other part of it, and I've been praying a lot about this, thinking a lot about this the last year plus. You move to a point where your mission is funded. So maybe you can look out multiple years and create a plan of what you want to do, and you're not living, hand to mouth. You're in a different place. You're not necessarily in excess reserves or some sort of, super abundant position, but you're living a different way. And that's where I think this you move to a different problem. You move to the other side of the problem, which is, okay, how do you start looking out for when you have too much in terms of financial resources? Because I do believe, and I think history would bear witness to this, that there are situations where us humans working in the church, especially leadership, get in a place where it's like, okay, you have an abundance of resources now, and you change the way you approach your work. You changed your priorities. And so how do you keep that original, whatever it is, there's a mission frugality. There's all the good things that come along with having a little bit too little, not a lot too little, but a little bit too little.
Yeah.
How do you keep that in place through the ebbs and flows of funding cycles and not lose your way as people?
No, all good stuff. So we're going to take just a 30-second break to thank our sponsor, and we'll be right back with Craig Miller in just a short while.
With an authentically Catholic curriculum that includes 35 majors such as business, pre-nursing, biology, and psychology, alongside personal and professional formation, internships, and more, Ave Maria University equips students to bring their faith, knowledge, and leadership to the world. To learn more, visit avemaria.edu.
So, Craig, you spoke of a resource you're using for culture from Pat Lencioni, and just by way of clarification for those who don't know, Pat Lencioni is a solid Catholic, but his day job for the past 30 years is in the secular world, and he's among the very best. So the whole idea that we're turning to those types of resources to bring into the church really is a switch in mentality, perhaps from nonprofit mentality to a for-profit mentality. So what resources are you using from Pat, and why, and how's it going?
Yeah, really, it's like we have a big debt of gratitude to Pat. We have a culture with some definition because he helped us get there. And I don't know if it's a single resource. We rely heavily on the Advantage. The Advantage leads to a lot of discussions, new departmental work, or revamping or modifying work that's already been done several years ago. We'll go back to the Advantage and ask questions. And part of the questions we ask are about determining what's important in culture. And so for Focus, we have been able to narrow it down. We have, Pat says, speak about the values that are important in your culture. You'd be surprised how long it took us to do that. There are so many things that could go into, well, this is an important value.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, we thought, look, we want to simplify it in a way that everybody can remember it. And they know what they're really paying attention to. So that was part of our exercise, was to bring it all down to just a few.
And what was the fruit by your doing that?
We do believe that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? You can have this amazing strategic plan. You can even have amazing people around to execute that plan. But if you have an unhealthy culture, it's going to be really difficult to make a positive impact anywhere. So we know that we're very committed to it. We're human. We violate it all the time. We run against culture. For us, we simplified it. We cared about how people showed up and the way they approached their work. We cared about how they engage with others, right? And we cared about, what does this mean to you? And does it show, does it reflect that it means this to you? We went after those things in our culture.
You speak about the importance of measuring success. Why is that important?
Yeah, I just think we owe it to people who do the work. We really do. They show up, they're 100% committed. They work so hard at what they do. If in some way they didn't know they were moving a particular needle of impact, they didn't know that takes something away from the work that they're doing. So you use metrics, and I really, especially in the work of the church, like we caution our leadership all the time, don't go here. We're not using metrics to beat anybody over the head. So many of our metrics don't even go into job performance. Metrics of effort will go into a job performance evaluation, but metrics of results don't. For one, it'd be Pelagian, but two, it's ridiculous because whatever part of the vineyard we're working in, just sometimes it's harder than others. So we can measure our pace and our effort and try to keep ourselves accountable to things. But when you do that, I think it's intrinsically rewarding. I think leaving people out as to, well, is this going well? I'm not sure. That's very frustrating, especially I think for a high-performing individual.
So we're going to go touch the third rail here, and you touched on it earlier, but it really needs to be addressed, and that is the need for Catholic apostolates to have a business model that works so they can pay meaningful wages to families, so families are not overly stressed. What are your thoughts on the need for meaningful wages in Catholic apostolates?
Such a good question. One we wrestled with for a long time. What's the distinction between meaningful and maybe excessive or exorbitant pay or compensation? What does that look like in a not-for-profit? There's an individual, you may have seen him, he's on YouTube, pretty popular, millions of views, who tries to break the paradigm saying, if you get what you invest, if you're going to invest short in your people, it would be ridiculous to expect anything else but a contribution short of what you desire. So that's always there, right? You look at it within the church, and I think there's some areas here for us to really self-examine and say, really, though again, those old paradigms, do they still work? Are those some old wineskins, kind of tired, never really worked well in the first place? And should we move on? And move on, what does that look like? So I'll say a couple of things that we observed. One is we observed the short careers of lay ministers in the Catholic Church. Depending on the role, some would say as short as 18 months on average, and they're in and they're out, which is an indication that their heart said, I wanted to do this work. But in a practical reality, particularly if they had family, they got in to do the work and said, I just can't do this. I love this work, but I also love my family. And this doesn't work. And they feel bad about it. They feel, is that an indication of greed? It's ridiculous. Of course not. We have real need, and the laborer deserves their wages, and that has meaning. So what does that look like? There's an expectation, almost an imposition of sacrifice in what's communicated in compensation. Like, you will bear this sacrifice because I'm allowing you to do this great work. I would, all the time, 100% of the time, recommend or encourage sacrifice. For any individual, I think it's a very important part of our spiritual life.
Sure.
I don't think as an employer it's my role to impose it upon somebody. If you feel like you stepped into a role, maybe a professional role in our technology group, and you feel like, wow, this is a pretty competitive wage. I didn't think I'd be doing this well, nor do I really need to be doing this well. We'd be the first to encourage you, please be generous. Be generous with others. It's not our part to dictate what your family budget looks like. If you manage in a place where you can be generous, please do so.
Thanks for that. A leader of a really successful Catholic apostolate, and by successful, I mean they're reaching many, many people and doing fabulous work, told a story one time, Craig, of a bishop, and again, we love the bishops, we love the church, who wanted to have a salary, and he said, well, if we used this salary, let's say it was $80,000, we can get two people for $40,000 each instead of paying $180,000, to which the leader of this fairly good Catholic apostolate, who's a great guy, I know him personally, said, yeah, but Bishop, why not look to get a really good person, instead of two maybe broken situations? To me, that just was a paradigm shift of sorts that I think the church that you and I love needs to really consider.
Because I did have two practical points, and you jumped right to the first one, which is, are you sure you got the right game plan for engaging personnel with this type of a policy or belief? Just from a practical perspective, I'd ask the question, like you just did, what built a more efficient payroll? As we moved in the way we do this, we looked at that. And I'm pleased to tell you, for about 4 years straight, our contribution to payroll, our missionaries raised some of their support, but a lot of our professionals and other folks don't. Our contribution to payroll did go up over 4 years, even though we were doing a whole lot more work, because we're really, really committed to. We're looking at the most efficient investment, and if it's somebody that makes 1.5 times as much as what was available in sort of the mainstream of the labor pool there for that job, but they do 2x or sometimes even 3x the output. Well, that's just a practical answer to that question. And I will also tell you, one thing I observed, even in the most hardline not-for-profits, when it comes to this question, they will often make the exception when it comes to fundraising. Here's my sort of thesis or belief on why that is because fundraising comes right back at them. They're like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and invest this level because I can empirically see the 3x change, and it really helps the apostolate. And I can go on my board and justify it. And I have witnessed we have a distorted payroll when it comes to our development folks. They're sort of like, we have everybody else, then we have our development people. It's a supply and demand thing. People want those individuals who are very committed to the missions they're supporting and out there getting it done. The upside is so worth it to the organization. They see it. Now, here's my follow-up challenge for myself and all others who are in leadership positions. Okay, you can see it, measure it, it's empirical, it's real when you come to fundraising, when you look at fundraising. What makes you believe it's not true everywhere else?
Yeah.
It just might not be as measurable or as immediately measurable, but it's going to make a difference in the same way.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. We could look at marketing, we could look at HR, we could look at, so many different areas that if you're getting people who are at the top of the game, it's absolutely downline going to reflect on the organization, button it up in so many ways. And ultimately, Craig, the ultimate beneficiary is the church and the laity for these investments, even if in the initial few seconds of considering it, that may come into question. But over 35 years of watching these things play out, I echo your sentiments. I think of the parable of the talents, that the one who out of fear buried it, he was the one that the Lord rebuked. And I think there's some lessons in there for those of us who work in apostolates. And sure, it's a little dicey business at times. There's gray areas that we're unsure about, but I think we need to move forward in faith and put the Lord to the test that he will magnify our efforts if we take those risks.
If you can bring these things in that work well in other places, so they truly are best practices in achieving your purposes or your mission, if you could do that in a way that doesn't violate any of the critical sense of your Christian identity, and I mentioned it's 80-10-10, so probably 10% will never fit.
Yeah.
But if you can do that, we're committed to it. I'd always suggest others look the same way. Like what could make this a better experience for my employees? What could make this a more rewarding investment for those who take the time, talent, and treasure to be part of what we're doing? I think we owe that to them, and I would only encourage, go in this direction, use your caution, but our 25-year experience would say it's been helping us.
Yeah, well, as an outsider looking in and a fan and friend for many years, I would give that testimony as well. So please say hello to Curtis and the team. You guys are doing great work. You've done a yeoman's job over the past 10 years as president. You're entering in a new phase with focus in a different mission, and you're going to do fabulous with that as well as part of the focus mission. So again, good work, Craig. Thanks for your time, and I'm sure I'll run into you soon.
Thank you, Matt. God bless you.
Very good. Thanks, Craig. So thank you to Craig Miller and our topic, running your nonprofit with a for-profit mentality. I learned a whole host of things today. Hopefully you did as well. I know at times we wonder whether we should be looking at our nonprofits in this manner. I think if we're guarding our hearts, we absolutely can. And I think we'll create better nonprofits because of it. Thank you for joining us here on the Catholic Entrepreneur Podcast. Be sure to like us on whichever platform you are listening to us on. Also, we're giving away these mugs, as I've shared before. You can just enter your email address in at catholicentrepreneur.org, and randomly we'll choose some names each month and send you something in the mail. Once again, thank you for listening to this episode, and we hope you'll join us again.